03:15 a.m., February 1943. RAF Station 139, Thorpe Abbotts, England. The air in Hangar 3 is so cold it stings the lungs, a bitter metallic cold that seeps through wool and leather. Arthur Art Donovan, 58 years old and classified as a civilian maintenance auxiliary, pushes a galvanized mop bucket. The rhythmic slosh of the grey water and the scrape of the string mop are the only sounds, a stark contrast to the roar of engines that defines the daylight hours. He is not aircrew, he is not an engineer. He is the man who cleans the oil stains and the coffee spills from the briefing room floor. But from here, he sees everything. He sees the B-17Fs of the 100th Bomb Group return, their green fuselages looking black in the dusk, their forms skeletal, ripped open by 20mm cannon fire and flak. He sees the ground crews, young men with old eyes, swarm the planes, their faces grim. He's too old to fight, his son already lost to the U-boats in the Atlantic. His war is one of sawdust and solvents, a peripheral, silent failure. He feels useless, sweeping away the debris of a conflict he cannot join. Tonight, his focus is on a .50 caliber machine gun, pulled from the ball turret of the Flying Dutchman, sitting dismantled on a workbench. A young armourer, his hands stained black, fights with the feed mechanism. The gun is pristine, yet it jammed solid over Bremen. Art watches him, then looks at the small, congealed puck of standard-issue lubricant on the bench. It's frozen, as hard and useless as a chunk of amber. Art Donovan cannot get the image of the frozen grease out of his mind. He finishes his rounds, the hangar echoing with the clatter of his bucket handle, but his thoughts are 25 Joseon feet above the English Channel. He thinks about the armourer's frustrated sigh. It's the cold, Art. It's always the cold. This stuff turns to rock. The guns are fine, the heaters are useless, and the grease just quits. Art nods, saying nothing. He isn't a scientist, but he knows cold. For 20 years before the war, he was a maintenance foreman for a commercial refrigeration plant in Chicago. He knew the precise smell of ammonia refrigerant, the behavior of lubricants in flash freezer tunnels. He knew what they used on the conveyor belts that ran 24 hours a day at 40 below zero. It wasn't petroleum grease. That was suicide. Later, he sees a young engineer, Staff Sergeant Mike Valenti, poring over a technical manual under a cone of harsh light. Valenti is cursing, his pencil snapping. It's impossible. The specs for ANG-3A say it's rated for low temps. It's a lie. Art, holding his broom, pauses. You're using the wrong stuff, son. Valenti looks up, annoyed. What? For the cold, Art says, gesturing with his chin. In the freezers we never used petroleum. We used graphite. Valenti just stares at him. Graphite? That's for pencils, old man. Get out of here, I'm busy. Art just nods, the old familiar feeling of being overlooked, settling on him. He turns to leave. What he didn't know was that this quiet observation, born from a lifetime of cleaning floors and tending freezers, would change the air war over Germany. The strategic problem facing the US 8th Air Force in 1943 is one of brutal physics. The operational mandate is high-altitude, daylight precision bombing, striking at the heart of German industry. But high altitude is a sterile term for an environment more hostile than the surface of Mars. At 25 Joseon feet, the ambient air temperature drops to 40 degrees, and by 30 Joseon feet it is consistently 60 degrees or colder. At this temperature, metal becomes brittle, rubber hoses shatter, and human flesh freezes in seconds. The primary technical crisis, as outlined in an Urgent Air Technical Service Command (ATSC) report from Wright Field, Ohio, is lubricant failure. The standard issue lubricant, specification ANG3A, is a petroleum-based grease. It is an excellent protector against corrosion and functions perfectly on the ground in England. But at altitude, its viscosity collapses. It congeals, hardens, and then freezes solid. The report is a litany of catastrophic non-combat failures. Field Report 43B, Analysis of 100th BG Aborts. 22% of all mission aborts over the target area are attributed to frozen bomb bay doors, mechanisms failing to cycle. A further 18% of defensive failures are linked directly to seizure of turret traverse mechanisms, specifically the M2 ball turret and M3 dorsal turret. The Wehrmacht's Luftwaffe pilots are not fools. They quickly learn that the American Fliegende Festung, the flying fortress, becomes a defenseless whale if they attack from certain angles after the planes have been at altitude for more than 2 hours. The War Office tries desperate solutions. Electrical heating elements are installed in gun breeches and turret motors. They are heavy, drain precious power from the electrical systems, and frequently short out, causing fires. Engineers try diluting the grease with gasoline or kerosene. This provides initial mobility, but flashes off or evaporates within a detection, leaving the gears grinding metal on metal until they fuse. The problem seems insurmountable. A grease that can function in the 120-degree heat of a Libyan tarmac, and the 60-degree world void over the Third Reich. The data in the ATSC reports translates into human tragedy. Sight start. That 18% failure rate is not a statistic. It is the crew of the Mary Ann, their plane falling from the formation over Schweinfurt Site 9. The waist gunner, a 19-year-old from Brooklyn, squeezes the butterfly trigger of his M2 Browning. Nothing happens. The charging handle is frozen. He pounds it with his gloved fist, the metal stinging even through the sheepskin. He sees the Focke-Wulf 190, its nose winking with the yellow light of its 20mm cannons, line up for a pass. Sight start. The gunner is helpless, a spectator to his own execution. Sight 10. The plane shudders as the shells find their mark. The other crews watch it fall, a 10-mile descent into oblivion. Sight start. The men inside não resistiram aos ferimentos. Sight 4. Sight start. They are listed as desapareceu em circunstâncias misteriosas. Sight 4. A sterile phrase for a terrifying end. This is the reality of the air war. The true enemy is not just the flak or the fighters. It is the cold. Sight start. It is the physics that freezes a man's weapons, leaving him to lutava contra sua dor em silêncio. Sight 4. As he waits for the inevitable. The psychological toll is immense. Crews return, shaking, not from fear, but from the vibrating helplessness of frozen controls. Morale plummets. The planners at High Wycombe, staring at maps and casualty figures, are trapped. The bombers are flying blind and defenseless. Their fortress moniker, a bitter joke. Experts agreed. A universal all-weather lubricant was a chemical impossibility. It couldn't be done. These small, forgotten technical battles often decided the fate of thousands. If you find these hidden stories of innovation compelling, stick around. The solution came from the most unlikely place imaginable. Arthur Art Donovan was born in 1885 in the back streets of Chicago's meatpacking district. He is not a scholar. He left school at 14 to help support his family, sweeping floors at the Union stockyards. He is a man defined by texture and observation. He has a quiet, meticulous nature. While other men drank their pay, Art saved his, eventually working his way up to maintenance foreman for a commercial refrigeration company by 1920. His world was not one of theory, but of practice. The specific groan a bearing makes before it seizes, the crystalline structure of ice on an ammonia pipe, the tactile difference between axle grease and hydraulic fluid. He is a man who hates waste and keeps a small, grease-stained notebook filled with chemical mixtures, cleaning solutions, and torque ratios. He is a widower. His only son, Thomas, was a merchant mariner. His ship, the SS Moria, was torpedoed and lost with all hands in the North Atlantic in late 1942. Grief-stricken and too old to enlist, Art felt a desperate, gnawing need to contribute. He liquidated his small pension, signed on with the Civilian Contractor Corps, and requested a transfer to the most dangerous theatre, England. He was assigned to the 100th Bomb Group as a General Maintenance Auxiliary, a glorified janitor. He wasn't an engineer, but he understood one thing better than any PhD at the War Office: the precise, relentless, and deceptive nature of extreme cold. He knew how cold didn't just freeze oil, it crystallized it, separating its components, turning a lubricant into an abrasive. And he knew, with the certainty of 20 years of experience, what you use to keep a meat locker's conveyor belt moving at 30 below zero. It wasn't oil, it was graphite. The idea crystallizes late one night. Art is in the maintenance bay, long after his shift has ended. He's supposed to be sweeping. Instead, he stands before a dismantled ball turret mechanism, salvaged from a wreck. He dips his finger into the tub of standard issue ANG3A grease. It's thick, amber, and sticky in the unheated hangar, which is perhaps 40 degrees. He rubs it between his thumb and forefinger. He can feel the petroleum base. He knows exactly what this will do at 60 degrees. It will become a brick. He walks to his small grey metal locker hidden in a utility closet. He pulls out a few borrowed items: a small can of flake graphite, normally used for lubricating locks, and a glass jar of low-viscosity hydraulic fluid, the kind used for the delicate landing gear struts. He finds an old empty bean can. Using a salvaged hot plate he keeps hidden to heat his tea, he begins to mix. He melts the hydraulic fluid until it's thin, then slowly stirs in the graphite, creating a thin, black, greasy slurry. Staff Sergeant Valenti, the young engineer from the night before, finds him. The smell of hot metal and oil fills the small closet. "What in God's name are you doing, Art? That's a Norden bomb site crate you're burning for heat. You'll have the major on us." Art doesn't look up. He just holds up the bean can. "It's the grease. It's too thick. We used graphite in the freezers. It doesn't freeze." Valenti scoffs, a bitter, tired laugh. "Graphite? That's for pencils, old man. You put that slurry in a high-speed ball turret gearbox, you'll jam it solid with grit. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard." Art finally looks up, his eyes clear. "Stupider than sending them up there with guns that don't move?" Valenti's cynicism falters. The question hangs in the cold air. Art turns back to his hot plate. "I need to test it." Valenti, despite his words, is a good engineer. He's desperate. The official channels are failing and his friends are dying. He makes a decision: not here. He leads Art to the boneyard, a snow-dusted field behind the hangars, piled high with the skeletal remains of B-17s. It's a graveyard of aluminum and plexiglass. Major Harrison sees this. "We're both on a transport home," Valenti mutters. "But if we're going to do this, we do it right." They find what they need: a salvaged, intact ball turret gearbox, scarred by flak but mechanically sound. Under the harsh glare of a single, battery-powered trouble lamp, they begin the real work. Art, with a meticulousness that borders on obsession, spends 2 nights disassembling the entire mechanism. He uses solvents, dental picks and pipe cleaners to remove every last trace of the yellow ANG3A grease from the bearings, gears and worm drives. The air is frigid, their breath pluming in the lamp's beam. The only sounds are the metallic scrape of Art's tools and the distant, mournful howl of the wind over the airfield. Art refines his mix. The hydraulic fluid is too thin. It might run. The graphite is too coarse. It might bind. He needs something to hold it in suspension. Valenti, now fully committed, finds a tiny, priceless sample tube of an experimental silicone compound sent from the ATSC at Wright Field, labeled Experimental Insulator, High Dielectric. It was meant for radar equipment. Art adds a few drops. The black slurry changes texture, becoming smoother, silkier, clinging to the metal. They can't fly, but they can simulate the flight. Valenti procures a large block of dry ice from the medical bay's refrigerators. They pack the reassembled gearbox into a wooden crate, surrounding it entirely with the dry ice. They wait, checking a thermometer. An hour passes. 2. The metal of the gearbox is white with frost, the temperature gauge reading 70 degrees Celsius. Valenti has a small electric motor and a portable generator. He hooks the motor's drive shaft to the gearbox input. "First test," he says, "standard grease." He produces a second gearbox, identical, but filled with the ANG3A. He'd frozen it alongside Art's. He hits the switch. The motor hums, strains, and lets out a high-pitched squeal. The drive shaft shudders and stops, completely seized. The grease is solid rock. "Right," Valenti says, his voice tight. "That's the control." He swaps the motor to Art's gearbox. The black graphite-laced mechanism is so cold it burns the skin to touch. Art nods. Valenti hits the switch. The motor whines, and the gears turn. It's slow, it's labored, but it turns. The turret's drive shaft makes one full grinding rotation, then another, faster. Art watches, dissatisfied. It's binding, too thick. He takes the gearbox, thaws it, and spends another hour thinning the mixture with more of the silicone fluid. They freeze it again. This time, when Valenti hits the switch, the motor whines and the gearbox spins, smoothly, effortlessly. It runs for 10 minutes without a hint of strain. They just stare at it, the black shaft spinning perfectly in a cloud of its own frozen breath. Valenti touches the housing, pulling his hand back from the numbing cold. "I'll be damned," he whispers, a slow smile spreading across his face. Art just wipes his black, greasy hands on his overalls. "It needs to be thinner." They had just proved the experts wrong with a bean can and a block of ice. If stories like this fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation might surprise you. Staff Sergeant Valenti writes a 2-page report attaching his own test data and temperature logs and sends it up the chain of command. The response is not congratulatory, it is immediate and furious. 2 days later, Art and Valenti are standing at rigid attention in the station commander's office. Behind the desk sits Major Harrison, an engineer on detached service from the Air Technical Service Command at Wright Field. He is a man who lives by specifications, protocols, and stock numbers. In his hand, held between two fingers as if it were a dead rat, is Art's bean can, still holding a residue of the black slurry. "Staff Sergeant Valenti." Harrison's voice is low and controlled, radiating displeasure. "You are authorizing the use of an uncertified, untested compound developed by a civilian auxiliary in a $300,000 piece of strategic government property. Do you have any idea the level of insubordination this represents?" Valenti, pale but resolute, stands firm. "Sir, with respect, the standard issue grease fails at 40. We have the logs to prove it. This compound functions perfectly at 70. We tested it." Harrison slams the can on his desk. "You contaminated a precision instrument, Sergeant. This Donovan's Guck has no stock number. It has no procurement data. It is a flagrant violation of every maintenance protocol in the 8th Air Force Manual." Art, who had been standing silently by the door, his hat in his hands, finally speaks. His voice is quiet without a trace of deference. "Major, those protocols are for planes on the ground. They're not for planes at 30,000 feet. Your grease is getting men killed. My gook might not. You're worried about your protocols. I'm worried about that ball turret gunner sitting in a metal fishbowl, waiting for his guns to jam while a Fokker wolf lines him up. Sir." The room is deathly quiet. Harrison glares at the old janitor, then at Valenti. The tension is thick enough to cut. "One plane," Harrison says, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You get one plane. The Lucky Strike. She's a hangar queen, always has problems. You can use her. If this stuff causes a single failure, Valenti, you're demoted to private and assigned to latrine duty in Greenland. And Donovan, you'll be on the next boat home, permanently blacklisted. Am I clear?" The briefing room is thick with smoke, the air tense. The target for the day is the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory at Bremen. The Lucky Strike, a B-17F, known for its finicky electrical system and constantly jamming turrets, has been pulled from the line. For 48 hours, Art and Valenti, working without sleep, have stripped and cleaned every moving part exposed to the cold. The ball turret, the dorsal turret, the bomb bay door mechanisms, and even the landing gear actuators. They meticulously hand-pack each bearing and gearbox with the new, refined black slurry. At 05, no reserve, Art and Valenti stand on the freezing tarmac, the roar of 400 Wright Cyclone engines deafening them. They watch the Lucky Strike lift off into the pre-dawn gloom. Then they wait. 8 hours pass. 9. The sky is empty, the silence heavier than the earlier noise. Then a single speck. The control tower fires a red flare, a wounded bird returning. It's the Lucky Strike, alone. 2 engines sputtering, her fuselage riddled with holes. She lands hard, slewing on the runway, but her gear holds. The emergency crews race out. When the crew climbs down, they are shaking but alive. The ball turret gunner, a 20-year-old kid from Ohio, stumbles out and sees Art and Valenti by the hardstand. He runs over to them, pulling off his frozen helmet. I don't know what you did." He gasps, his words choked with adrenaline. I don't know who you are, but they never stopped. We had wolves on us for 30 minutes, all the way from the target. The guns never stopped. The mission debrief is stark. The 100th BG lost 7 bombers. The Lucky Strike, however, is credited with 6 confirmed defensive kills, all from its turrets. Its bomb bay doors, which had failed on the previous 2 missions, opened on the first try. Major Harrison is there, listening to the debrief. He walks out to the plane, looks at the gunner, then at Art. He says nothing. He walks to the still open bomb bay, reaches up, and dips his gloved finger into the black grease on the actuator. He rubs it between his thumb and forefinger. It's still slick. He looks at Art, and for the first time, his expression is unreadable. He just nods once. The next day, a priority telex is sent from Station 139 to ATSC, Wright Field, Ohio. The subject, emergency lubricant, experimental, graphite silicone base, priority R&D. The effect is immediate. Donovan's Guck, as the crews affectionately call it, is fast-tracked. The official designation becomes Specification XP-L14. Within weeks, chemical plants in Ohio and New Jersey, under military contract, begin mass production of a refined, standardized version. By the spring of 1944, every bomber, and later every fighter in the European and Pacific theaters, is serviced with the new compound. The impact on the air war is quiet but profound. An internal 8th Air Force memo, circulated in May 1944, notes a 40% decrease in mechanical failure-related aborts and a statistically significant increase in the defensive effectiveness of bomber groups, particularly against head-on attacks. The new grease, combined with the arrival of the long-range P-51 Mustang escort, finally tips the balance. It allows the bombers to fly higher, in the colder, safer altitudes, above the effective ceiling of the German flak, and to fight back reliably when they got there. It adds, in effect, hundreds of miles of effective range, as missions that would have been aborted due to frozen bomb doors or seized controls can now be completed. The long-term consequences are even greater. The principles Art Donovan discovered in a bean can, the use of synthetic bases like silicone and solid lubricants like graphite, become the foundation for all modern aerospace lubrication. The Cold War's B-52 bombers, the high-flying SR-71 Blackbird, and the X-15 rocket plane all rely on synthetic lubricants that can withstand impossible temperature ranges. When NASA designs the Apollo lunar rover, the grease used for its wheel bearings has to function in the pulse 250 degrees of direct sunlight and the 250 degrees of lunar night. The solution is a direct descendant of XP-L14. Arthur Donovan is never famous. He receives a small civilian commendation for meritorious service and a $100 war bond. After the war, he doesn't return to the refrigeration business. He stays on with the newly formed U.S. Air Force as a civilian maintenance supervisor, quietly respected by the young engineers who knew the story. He passes away in 1962, his name unknown to history, buried in a simple Chicago cemetery, a footnote in a war defined by generals and aces. Today, the challenges of engineering are not just 60 degrees, but the hard vacuum of space and the cryogenic temperatures of liquid hydrogen. The lubricants that keep the James Webb Space Telescope's mirrors aligned to catch the light of the first stars, or the bearings that allow the Mars Perseverance rover's wheels to turn on a frozen, dusty plain, are all built on the same fundamental principle, that petroleum is not the only answer. They are all direct descendants of that first desperate, insane slurry mixed in a cold English hangar. Innovation doesn't always come from the designated genius. It doesn't always happen in the boardroom, the university lab, or the government think tank. Sometimes true, paradigm-shifting insight comes from the fringe. It comes from the person with the mop, the one who sees the problem from the ground up, the one with calloused hands and a different set of memories. It comes from the quiet observer who has the courage to ignore protocol and say, "You're using the wrong stuff." The vast, concrete hangars of RAF Thorpe Abbots are quiet now, museums to the thunder that once filled them. The B-17s are gone. But in every sealed bearing on every jetliner that streaks 35,000 feet overhead, a ghost of Art Donovan's idea flies with it, a silent witness to the janitor who saw what the experts insisted was impossible. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible ideas do you think could change the world?